Okay, so today we are going to be doing finding sides using trig. Sides of right triangles. Trig only works with right triangles. So we're going to go to day, it says 9 here, but I think it's 8 in the computer. Somewhere we missed a day. Oh, the snow day, we missed a day. Everything got behind because we doubled up. A review and a mixed day. All right, so Unit 6, it's actually day 8. Oh, no, we are day. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. That's why. Day 7, it's correct. There we go. Finding sides using trig. Okay? So to use the trig functions on a calculator, it's super important to make sure your calculator is in degree mode. Most of your calculators probably are in degree mode because third period did it for you. But just in case the person who picked up your calculator that you picked up during third period, if they're like kind of a mean person, they might have reset the calculator and now it's no longer in degrees. Okay? So I do want to show everybody how to go through and look to make sure you're in degrees, or how to put it in degrees, and then also how to check once you're there. So from your home screen, everybody should be using their calculators, which means your phone should not be in your hand, your calculator should be in your hand. Your phone should not be in your hand, your calculator should be in your hand. Ariana? Okay. All right, so from your home screen, if you're not on your home screen, just click the home button. You'll be at your home screen. We're going to go to number 5, settings. And then from there, we're going to select number 2, document settings. You can either type the 2 or you can arrow down to it. And then from here, you want to make sure that the second option says degree. So this first option is just telling you how many places it's going to round to. If you're really bad at rounding to 3 places, which we always do, you can change that float 6 to float 3, and it'll always round you to 3 places. Just a kind of fun little fact. But we just want to make sure that says degree. If it doesn't say degree, if it says either radians or gradians, then you need to highlight degree and then hit enter. And here's how you know when you first get your calculator whether or not it's in degree mode or not. If you open up a new document, if there's one there, we don't ever save them. We say no. And you add a calculator. In the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see it's either going to say DEG for degree, or it's going to say RAD for radian, or it's going to say GRAD for gradients. Okay? So we want to make sure that our calculator has a DEG right there. Does everybody have DEG right there on their calculator? Okay. So then our calculators are all in the correct mode. So you want to check that every day because you might get a calculator from somebody in third period who changed it back from what it had been. Okay? All right. So now we're going to talk about how to solve for missing side. So when you're given a right triangle where you know only one side, the only way up to today that we would have been able to solve it is if it's a special right triangle. If this was a 30, 60, 90 triangle, then we'd know this is my long leg, so I could divide out the square root of 3 for my short leg and then double that for my hypotenuse. Or if it was a 45, 45, 90 triangle, we'd know one leg is 20, the other leg is 20. This would be 20 square root of 2. But it's not a 30, 60, 90 or 45, 45, 90. It's a 32, 58, 90, right? So that's not going to help us. We can't use special right patterns on this. So what we do, we don't have enough information to use Pythagorean theorem because you need 2 sides to find the third side. So it's 4 steps. And it's going to seem like a lot when we go through it the first time, but the more you do it, the less you feel like you're going through 4 steps and you're just doing one problem. Okay? The very first thing you're going to do is what we practiced yesterday, just labeling opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse in relation to the acute angle that you know. So when I look at this picture, I can see I know this angle right here is 32 degrees. So that's where I'm going to put my smiley face. Then across from my right angle, just like yesterday, that's where I'm going to know to put my hypotenuse. So then if I highlight a little portion of the angle, I can see the two sides that make up the angle. One's the hypotenuse, so we call the other one the adjacent side. And then when my smiley face is yelling to the opposite side of the room, that's how I know where my opposite side is. That's step one. Step one, easy peasy. Label your triangle. We did that yesterday. Step two, we're going to circle a couple of things. Step two, we're going to circle the side we know how long it is, and we're going to circle the side that we want to find. So I'm going to circle the side that I know. I know the adjacent side is 20 units long. And the side I want to know is the hypotenuse. Then it asks me which trig function uses both of these. So I'm going to look at my SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. And I can see that I circled the adjacent side. So I'm going to put check marks by all the A's for adjacent. And I circled the hypotenuse. So I'm going to put check marks by the hypotenuses. Hypotenusi? I'm not sure how you plural that. So which trig function, sine, cosine, or tangent, has both check marks? Ca or cosine. We want to know what it is, right? So it's cosine. That's step two. Step two done. Step three. Set up the function and turn it into a proportion. So we know we're going to use the cosine. The cosine, oops, not cosine. The cosine, and remember yesterday we would say the cosine of angle A, or the cosine of J, or the cosine of L. Here we're doing the cosine of the angle, 32, is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. That's why we write it this way, so we can see what goes on top and what goes on the bottom. So the adjacent goes on top, that's 20. And the hypotenuse goes on the bottom, that's x. It says to set up the function and turn it into a proportion. So to turn a function into a proportion, remember a proportion is equal ratios. And remember, ratios are just a fancy word for fractions. So I need equal fractions. Well, the right-hand side is already a fraction. I need to turn the left-hand side into a fraction. How do I turn something into a fraction that's not a fraction? Put it over 1. Now they're both fractions. That is step 3. Your final step is to solve. That's all we have left to do. So step 4 says cross multiply to solve. So usually I'll start with the x and I'll multiply these two together. So x times the cosine of 32 equals, and then multiply these two. 20 times 1, that's just 20. So we cross multiplied, now we just need to solve for x. I have x times the cosine of 32. How do I get rid of something that's being multiplied to x? Yeah, divide it out. Divide by the cosine of 32. Divide by the cosine of 32. So on this side, my two cosines cancel, and I just have an x. As soon as you see x equals all by itself, that's when you're ready for the calculator. Calculator. X equals 20 divided by the cosine of 32. So to put that in my calculator, I type 20 divided by cosine. Look at this calculator, look at number 7, and look right to the left of it. You should see a button that says trig on it. When you press the trig button, you get all these options. We're only going to use the first 3, sine, cosine, and tangent. On this one, we want to use cosine. I'm going to arrow to cosine and hit enter. Notice it opens and closes parentheses already for me because it knows it's got to be the cosine of an angle. What's the angle I'm taking the cosine of? 32. It's going to automatically close that parenthesis for you. You don't have to do it. You can if you're just like, I need to push it. But you don't have to. And we're going to round this to 3 decimal places. My answer is going to be 23.585. 4. Step 4, done. Questions? Okay. So I know it kind of seems like those 4 steps take forever, but once you I don't have to stop and pause and talk about each one individually, they go pretty quick. Okay? So we have these 5 problems here we're going to do. When I look at number 1, the very first thing I'm going to see is what my acute angle is that I know. The acute angle I know is 36 degrees. So that's where I'm going to label from. Which side is my hypotenuse? The x to 7 or the unlabeled side? Unlabeled. If I look at the angle, which one's the adjacent side? 7. Meaning when I yell across to the opposite side of the triangle, the x is my opposite side. Alright, then I'm going to look at so, ka, toa. And I'm going to look at the side that I know. Which side do I know how long it is? The adjacent side. So I'm going to put check marks by the A's. Which one do I want to know? The opposite side. So I'm going to put check marks by the O's. So which trig function has two check marks? Sine, cosine, or tangent? Tangent. So that's the one I want to use. Tangent. And then next to the word tangent is always the angle. Tangent, with respect to being at this 36 degree angle, is equal to opposite over adjacent. My opposite is x. My adjacent is 7. We want this to be a proportion, so I put the left side over 1. We've already done 3 of the 4 steps. All we have left to do is solve, right? Just cross multiply. X times 1, x. Then I have the 7 times the tangent of 36. Notice I have x equals already. Last time I had to divide out my cosine. Here I don't have to. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. We'll talk about, once we've done a couple, how you can tell when you're starting. It's not necessarily by which trig function you're doing. It depends on where your x is starting. If your x is starting up in the top or if your x is starting in the bottom. Okay? So since I have x equals, I can put 7 times the tangent of 36 in my calculator. 7 times the tangent of 36. It's going to close the parentheses for me. And I'm going to round to 3 places. And x equals 5.086. Remember, your multiplication is commutative. Sometimes when we do cross multiplication, you just think about going like down like this, and you'll say, oh, it's the tangent of 36 times 7. 36 times 7. Why didn't I get the same answer? I did tangent of 36 times 7. Yeah, if you look at the parentheses are saying we're doing this tangent thing to 36 times 7, so to a much bigger number. If you put in the tangent first, then you do have to manually close that parentheses to do times 7. And then you get your 5.086. Multiplication is commutative. You can do it in either direction. But you have to make sure that 7 is not in the parentheses. The only thing that can be in the parentheses is just the actual degree. Okay? Alright, so x equals 5.086, whatever the units are. Number 2. First thing I'm going to do is decide what angle I'm standing at. Where am I at? W63. Which one's my hypotenuse? Which one's my adjacent side? the unlabeled. So then we're yelling at the 12, right? That's on the opposite side of the triangle. So, ka, toa. All right, which trig function, or which two sides am I going to circle? Which one do I know? I know the opposite, and I know I'm trying to find the hypotenuse. So opposite and hypotenuse. Which trig function am I going to use? So, which stands for? Sine. A lot of times, and even in the calculator, you'll see just the sin, but we don't say sin. That's what we do, and then we have to confess. Right? This is not confession. This is geometry. So we're still going to say sine. Of how many degrees? 63 equals O over H. What's my fraction going to be? 12. Good. 12 over X. Put the left side over 1 and cross multiply. So when I cross multiply, I'm going to get X times the sine of 63 equals 12 times 1. Can I go straight to the calculator, or do I need to divide this time? I am going to have to divide this time. You'll notice eventually, anytime your X is in the bottom, if it's in the denominator, it's going to end up being multiplied to the trig function, right? So that's when you're going to have to divide out that trig function. So if your X is in the denominator, divide. Denominator, divide. That's how I usually remember it. If you want to kind of skip this middle step, then you could go straight to, I know I'm going to be dividing by that trig function, which is the sine of 63. These will cancel out. X equals 12 divided by the sine of 63. This one you can't put in any other order. The 12 has to go in first, because otherwise you've got your fraction upside down. Sine, so trig sine of 63. When I hit enter and round to 3 places, that's going to be 13.468. Questions? Okay, let's look at 3. Number 3, what angle am I at? The 15 degrees. What side is my hypotenuse? 12. Which side is the adjacent side? The unlabeled side. Which means the X is the opposite. So, ha, toa. Alright, what sides am I going to circle? Hypotenuse and opposite. Which trig function do I want to use? Sine. Sine of what? 15 equals, what's my fraction going to be? X over 12. Am I going to be multiplying or dividing? Multiplying. X is going to be 12 times the sine of 15, or sine of 15 times 12. Just make sure you close that parentheses on the 15. So 12 times the sine of 15, oops, I added an extra parentheses, gives me 3.106. 3.106. Questions on 3? All right, let's look at number 4. Number 4, which angle am I at? 52.5. What side's my hypotenuse? Which side's adjacent? So that means X is the side we're yelling at on the opposite side of the triangle. So katoa. Alright, since I need to find both x and y, because it says find x and y up at the top for my directions, I have to pick first. I can't find them both at the same time. I have to decide, do I want to find x first or do I want to find y first? What do you want to find? X. Alright, so if I'm going to find x, what's the side that I know? The adjacent. So I'm going to be looking for the adjacent and the opposite. Which trig function am I going to use to find x? Tangent. So the tangent of what? 52.5 equals, what's my fraction going to be? So then that's going to, when I cross multiply, am I going to multiply or divide in the end? Multiply. Because x times 1, so x equals 5 times the tangent of 52.5. So 5 times the tangent of 52.5 is 6.516. 6.516. Let me make that a little more clear. Alright, so now we still need to find y. You could use that 6.516 and use opposite and hypotenuse, but if you made an error here, then that's going to throw off your answer. Plus, this answer is rounded, so that means you're going to have like a double rounding when you get this answer, because you're going to be using a rounded answer, and then you're going to be rounding that answer, so it's going to be like double rounded. So I would recommend not using this x value. I would stick with using this 5, because we know it's exactly a 5, to find this hypotenuse. So now we're going to use the adjacent and the hypotenuse. Which trig function do I want to use this time? Which stands for? Cosine. You'll learn the words. Cosine of what? 52.5 equals what fraction? 5 over y. Am I going to be multiplying or dividing? Dividing. When I do my fraction, when I divide, what's going to go on top? The cosine or the 5? The 5. If you didn't know that instinctively, then do your actual cross multiplication. You'll see it. I'll have y times the cosine of 52.5 equals 5 times 1. And so that's how the 5 ends up in the top, because the cosine is going to have to divide under the bottom. So y equals 5 divided by the cosine of 52.5. So that is 8.213. If you want to check the answer, this is a right triangle. You can apply your right triangle Pythagorean theorem converse, right? That says if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, you have a right triangle, or if a squared plus b squared, if this is too small, it's acute. If this is too big, it's obtuse. Where now we know that one leg is 5, one leg is 6.516, and the hypotenuse is 8.213. So if I do a squared plus b squared, it should equal c squared. Let's see. If I do 5 squared plus 6.516 squared, that should equal y squared, my 8.213 squared. Are they equal? No. Why are they not equal? We rounded. There's rounding error in our answers, right? So when you use rounded answers, you're going to have a little bit of error. If I don't use rounding, if I do 5 squared plus, and I go find that 6.516 from the calculator, so it's not going to round it, squared. And then I do this 8.213, but I go get it from the calculator, squared. Look at my two answers then. Because the calculator is like, oh, you want that whole thing? Gotcha. And it gives you the whole thing. Questions? Okay, one more. Number 5. Given triangle ABC, the measure of angle A is 45 degrees, the measure of angle C is 90 degrees, and AB equals 33.9411. Find X. There's no X since we don't have a picture, so we're going to change this from find X to find AC. Alright, so let's look at this one. First thing, what do you think we should do first? Yeah, let's draw a picture. So I'm going to have a right triangle. I don't know what it looks like, I just know it's a right triangle. It's triangle ABC. A is 45 degrees, so I know I can't put A at the 90 degree angle. So I'm going to put a 45 and call that A. C is my 90 degree angle. And then I need to still find B, or I need to label B. And then from A to B is 33.9411. Now the first thing I notice when I see this is I go, oh, this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So it should be leg square root of 2, but since we're doing trig, let's do trig, and then we can verify and see if it's leg square root of 2. Okay, we'll use that to check our answer. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what I want. I want AC, so I'm going to put an X there. That's what I'm trying to find. And now I'm going to label my triangle. So when I label my triangle, where am I going to be standing at?
41.
The 45 degree angle, angle A. Which one's my hypotenuse? 33. Which one's adjacent? X. And meaning this is then my opposite. And we're going to look at SO, CA, TOA. What side do I already know? I already know the hypotenuse. What side am I trying to find? The adjacent. Which trig function am I going to use? Cosine. Cosine of how many degrees? 45. Equals, what's going to go on top of my fraction? X, right? It's A over H. My A is X. My H is 33.9411. Put the left side over 1 so that you can cross multiply. Am I going to have to divide? No, X is in the top. Denominator divide. So X times 1 is just X equals 33.9411 times cosine of 45. So in my calculator, 33.9411 times cosine of 45 gives me, oh, nice whole number, 24. If this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, both legs should be the same, right? So if one's 24, then the other's also 24. And then my hypotenuse should be 24 square roots of what? 2. What is 24 square roots of 2? Oh, 33.9411. Isn't math great? How it always works. Lovely. Okay? We could have just taken this original fraction and said, oh, this is supposed to have a square root of 2 on it, so I need to remove the square root of 2 by dividing it out. And I could have found my answer by just doing 33.9411 and dividing out that square root of 2 to get my, now we did, oh, I didn't put the extra 1. 33.9411, although the answer was real, it would have rounded to 24. Divided by the square root of 2, 24. Okay? So sometimes more than one way to do a problem. A lot of times in the trig unit you'll get 45, 45, 90 triangles and 30, 60, 90 triangles. And if you remember the patterns and you don't want to do the trig, you can always just apply the pattern. That works as well. Okay? Alright, your assignment is available in Schoology.